Hello, and welcome back to the Diogenes Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Willingham, and together we will chew our way through Wokistan in search of an honest man, or woman, or they, them. I'm just kidding. There's nothing honest about any of that. Remember, if you enjoy the content on the Diogenes Podcast, please like and subscribe and tell your friends to join the pack. Also, share your thoughts in the comments section, but do so respectfully. We believe in free speech here at the Diogenes Podcast, but slurs are not arguments and trolling is not a meaningful contribution to discourse. Today I'd like to share a short essay from my forthcoming book, The Disasters of Woke, Manichean Dreams in Words and Pictures. This is entitled Massacred Race Relay. I open with a quote. When asked to state my race, I always put human in the required box. Put white, I was once told, by an African-American clerk, I might add. I explained that white was not even a color, let alone a race. I also drew his attention to the perjury provision that obliged me to state only the truth. Put Caucasian, I was told on another occasion. I said that I had no connection to the Caucasus and no belief in the outmoded ethnology that had produced the category. So it went on until one year there was no race space on the form. That was Christopher Hitchens from Letters to a Young Contrarian. Note, the following is from a letter I wrote to friends in June of 2021. Laura and I made it out to the book mill for a rare date yesterday in celebration of the start of her summer vacation. Given the beautiful weather, all the tables were occupied outdoors, so we ate in the Lady Killigrew dining room with a perfect view of the waterfall. Lovely. However, along with the persistent tribalism of unnecessary masking, MAGA hat equals bad, PPE equals good, there were other manifestations of wokeism that crept over the pleasures of the occasion. Seated just next to us were three people. A black man and a black woman, both college age, and a goofy white guy, perhaps a little older. Their conversation caught our attention for two reasons. One, it was conspicuously expansive and loud, performative, almost as if they wanted someone to ask them to be quiet in order to claim they were being oppressed. And two, because they were speaking at length about what it is like to be black and oppressed, which is clearly an exigent concern in a chic bookstore and cafe operated and patronized by hippies, middle-class academics, and bicycle tourists in the Happy Valley of western Massachusetts. The overarching theme seemed to be the stupidity of white people, the nobility of blacks, and the innate and irredeemable wretchedness of life in America. The white guy seemed to act as a sympathetic sounding board for the black kids' rancor and sarcasm, dropping prompts and invitations for them to testify about their inexcusable mistreatment growing up in America. This was carried on in and around the woman discussing her acceptance into a graduate program in Oregon, the importance of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and the joys of Verbo. Remember, she's oppressed. The black guy, who seemed to be the youngest of the three, held forth on, quote, what it takes to survive as a black person in America, end quote, and recounted how devastated he was at the police shooting of the autistic boy in Salt Lake City last year. Interestingly, he misremembered the boy as being black, he's white, and as having been shot by police for resembling someone who, quote, stole a can of soda or something, end quote. In fact, the boy, Lyndon Cameron, was having a violent mental breakdown, and his own mother had called the police for help with him, and not for the first time. What ensued was truly tragic, but then the police are not exactly psych orderlies either. Undeterred by having gotten every detail wrong, the black man continued to relate how he broke down during his shift at Staples when learning of the event, and that the manager sent, quote, some cute white girl to ask me why I was upset, end quote. To which he replied, isn't a black man allowed to be sad? That could have been me. Because apparently being a, quote, nerd who's into video games, end quote, remember, he's oppressed, is synonymous with being autistic and violent. He went on to talk about growing up in Chicago, where social expectations were just the opposite. If he smiled on the train, people would assume he was happy about having just committed a crime. All of this implying that black people are just not allowed to have feelings in America. Undoubtedly, this is why jazz is so boring. The white man and black woman also shared stories of their upbringing with an unexpected twist. The woman spent several years living in Denmark and traveling around Europe. Remember, she's oppressed. and the white man had lived in Namibia for several years. Isn't that colonization? When asked what life was like in Denmark, the woman said that Copenhagen was just like any other major European city, much better than living in America. The white guy lamented that when white people found out he had lived in Namibia, they always acted as if it was a frightening alien landscape populated by hostile natives, but in fact is much nicer than America. He also took great pleasure in relating how, when he told his Namibian friends that he liked to go camping, they thought he was crazy. They grew up living outdoors and cooking around a campfire and wondered why anyone with a house would ever do that willingly. The young black man laughed and said that his mother told him when he was a child that white people are the only people who would ever pretend to be homeless for fun, and added that camping out is actually a form of cultural appropriation. Fortunately, Laura and I finished our lunch at that point and left to browse the bookstore before further involuntary exposure to these expostulations worked their inevitable emetic effect. Passing the front counter in the bookstore, I noticed their display in all its woke glory. The titles included Negrophobia and Brown is the New White. Well, as someone said in the great HBO series Deadwood, while they inhale and exhale pure righteousness, my olfactors are keen to the scent of shit. There was also a small copy of the Constitution of the United States of America, which seemed somehow incongruous and forlorn in the company of the tracts that surrounded it, which is somewhat how I felt being at the book mill yesterday. This has been a beloved spot for me since it opened. I regularly hitchhiked from Boston on weekends to spend a day there. I had my first art exhibition there in 1993. A significant portion of my library was quarried and built from their stock. And now, as with so many establishments in the valley, I find myself recoiling from the place, its toxic politics, and the smug presumption of moral omniscience held by the patrons and the people who operate it. I did manage to find a few consolation prizes. A book on the paintings of J.M.W. Turner and the Sublime, the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, a vintage book of John Lennon's writings and drawings as a gift for my son Julian, and a copy of Christopher Hitchens' Letters to a Young Contrarian. Apposite all, and alas, all white. I just opened to a page of Hitch at random, and it seems fairly to sum up the whole adventure. Quote, "One must have the nerve to assert that while people are entitled to their illusions, they are not entitled to a limitless enjoyment of them, and they are not entitled to impose them on others." End quote. Yet this is precisely what is happening in every quarter of the culture. Like overheard conversation, it is in the very air. Hitchens continued, quote, "Allow a friend to believe in a bogus prospectus or a false promise, and you cease after a short while to be a friend at all." End quote. True enough. And I have spoken out and will continue to. And I've lost many friends in this bogus awakening. Friends who apparently would rather drift on the capricious winds of change and find refuge in their unexamined illusions than have a conversation that gets us both to a better understanding of reality. I've also learned that home is like a bookmark. It is a point of return, but it continually shifts as we move forward in the story, and sometimes we lose our place and have to start again before we can find our way back.